Yeah, I'll ask Rabbi about it as well. Yep. Yeah, I'm gonna touch on what I in my industry right now. What is that's one of the main goals. So you were able to get out of
I know.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
It was done in a weird. Yeah.
Right. More underneath after.
This is the church. The church. Wait till you see this.
To me, it looked a little.
It was, it's Lydia's anniversary today.
Who's?
Lydia.
Oh, okay.
So the event,
To do.
and they let us.
All right.
Is that over here?
Sorry.
Right over here?
Oh, sure. This one?
Yeah. Because there's another one just like.
Ah, okay. All right.
Where is that?
This is my.
All right. Here. And I guess. We're in the room. You want to see that?
Yeah, okay.
You want the armrest? Yeah, I don't know. I just want to say.
Yeah, I think there's some more people coming in. There's somebody. Yeah, we're blocking the door. And I got a couple.
Okay.
I thought I came here. Rabbi said, oh, I said, I think it's too quiet. Rabbi said, no, it's from here. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Everything went smooth. It's nice. Okay.
So I had to.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Temple Bethel.
Oh, that one from her.
Yes,
For everybody here.
yeah, that's what I was asking about.
Yeah, there's still people coming.
Yeah, I know.
People riding.
Bill, Jewish time.
Lucky I know it's 2 o'clock. I'm glad I can little.
We do have a microphone. We just need to find it. So, I'm Phyllis Miller. I'm the president of Sisterhood. Back there,
You have to talk right into it.
yeah, I thought that's what I was doing.
You have to talk into it like.
Aha.
You have to do it. Huh?
Anybody conversant in American Sign Language?
So actually, I took sign language in college. I do know.
That's it. All right, I'll talk louder. So I'm Phyllis Miller. I'm the president of our sisterhood. Back there is Mark Hilton. He's the president of Men's Club. And together, both organizations are sponsoring this program today because we both felt this is really important.
Here's your.
It was just working.
I don't know.
Try. This is a subject that all of us have to face at one time or another in our lives. Some of us have already been through this. Some of us maybe not, but all of us at the end will be. So when Bill Gleason of the Gleason Funeral Home hello. So Bill Gleason of Gleason Funeral Home volunteered to come and talk to us about various situations that occur at the end of life and how we can get what we want to happen. We said yes. Then he also suggested that Rabbi Garfinkel speak about Jewish traditions, and he said yes. And then Kim McManus from Beth Israel Cemetery, which is where our temple, I'm sorry, Bethel is the name of the temple.
Yes.
I got it, okay. Beth Israel Cemetery in Woodbridge, which is where our temple has a plot, heard about it and asked if she could come. And we said yes. So today we have these three people who are giving their time on a nice Sunday afternoon to tell us what we really need to know, whether we want it or not. So after the program, there will be refreshments in the back. And I want to give a shout out to the church that meets here every Sunday morning, because today was a special day for them. It was the anniversary of their pastor, and they had a big event in the social hall. So when you see these beautiful centerpieces and these flowers here, it's from the church. So happy to say that. Anyway, so I would like to introduce our first speaker by saying that Temple of Bethel has had an agreement with the Gleason family home for something like 40 years. Is that right, Bill?
I'd say, since.
Yeah, maybe more.
Built here, yeah.
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 Mhm.
The agreement maybe that style goes back even more. The use of.
Okay, and our rabbi at the time, Rabbi Schlessel, met with Bill's dad and gave him a course in Jewish funeral traditions. And so anyway, it's my pleasure to introduce Bill Gleason.
Thanks, Phyllis. All righty. Thanks so much, Phyllis. Should I use the microphone, or can people hear me without the microphone? Use the microphone. Okay, very good. So yes, thank you all for joining us here today. We're here to try to help whoever is interested with information. As Phyllis said, this is something that nobody does like to think about on a daily basis, but when you do face it, it is something that we all will be confronted with. And, obviously nothing fun about funerals, but, we would like to share with you some information that me as a funeral professional find really crucial knowledge as time marches on. So that's what I am here to do for you today. Little background, I just want to thank Rabbi, of course, for hosting us, and the women's club here and the men's club here, and all of you for joining us, of course. Just want to introduce a couple of my staff members that are here also. Joel Fermola, who is a licensed funeral director with me over here at the funeral home. I also have another team of a couple other funeral directors and part-time staff who happen to be, off today. And my son, Liam Gleason, he's my eldest son. He's working on gaining his funeral director's license. He's in mortuary school now. So we'll be here even after the service, after the seminar concludes. We'll be here to try to answer questions one-on-one. Feel free to grab us if you have any questions at all. We have some handouts and such like that I'll reference as we're moving forward. But yeah, a little bit further about the funeral home. We've been here in Franklin Township since 1969. Prior to that, we were in the city of New Brunswick. My grandfather founded our business in 1929. So just a few more years, we'll be 100 years. And I'm looking forward to celebrating that, perhaps with my retirement. I don't know. But yeah, we've had a wonderful relationship with the rabbis here, with Rabbi Garfinkel, with Rabbi Wise, with Rabbi Schlessel, my father, and Rabbi Schlessel grew to be very, very good friends. And I had the privilege to take care of his death care as well. So what I am going to do today is just talk about a few things that I find as critical subjects, really. The first group of subjects is going to be in regard to pre-planning funerals, right? What's involved, what to do. And the second thing that I really find even more crucial in today's day and age is about some of the legalities surrounding funeral execution, I guess I would say, right? How is a funeral actually legally taken care of, right? Because the first subject, pre-planning, sure, anybody could come to the funeral home and say, Bill, I want to pre-plan, pre-fund my funeral, and this is what I want done, A, B, C, D. Okay, great. Have it all on record, have it all paid for. Now, come the time of someone's passing, believe it or not, even though you've come to us and done that, that still is not a legal decision. It's up to the person who survives or the person who legally has responsibility to follow out those directions. So even though you've made those decisions yourself and put it onto paper and even perhaps pre-funded that, somebody can still come along and say, no. Mom she didn't know what she was talking about when she came to you and did that. Okay. And hence I have to follow that individual's direction. That is New Jersey state law. So it does bring into question, who is it that you're going to have that discussion with? Who is it that you're going to put that responsibility on? And who is it ultimately that you trust to handle those decisions? Very important decisions, right? So I'm going to go into some detail about that. But first, as I said, I do want to just speak with you about pre-planning and perhaps pre-funding funerals and what the difference is between the two things and how you would go about doing those two things, right? And some of the legalities, of course, that are involved in the state of New Jersey to do so. So the first step, what do I do? How do I pre-plan my funeral, Bill? Take the first step. Pick the phone up, call, if not our funeral home, call your local funeral home, the funeral director that you trust, that you have a relationship with. Pick the phone up, schedule an appointment, put the time aside to sit down. You can give it an hour or two, give the time it deserves. Sit down, spend an hour or two, and get the information that you need. Most everyone here, I'm sure, has a lot of questions about a subject that we're pretty much only faced with, maybe once every 12 years, 15 years, maybe once every 20 years, if we're blessed. So, I'd encourage you, take the time, make the phone call, set the time aside to meet and give the subject the time it deserves, right? Schedule an appointment. Once you do so, you come to, the funeral home, you sit down with your funeral director. These are the kind of things that are going to be addressed, right? Typically, my first thing would be to gather all pertinent information about an individual, all vital information. We use that vital information in the state of New Jersey to do a couple things. File death certificates, right? We need things like Social Security numbers, mother's maiden name, legal address. Legal address can be another whole different topic. What if somebody's out of state, right? That's a whole nother topic of discussion that I can answer questions on. But that's one of the first things that I would do, right, is gather all that type of pertinent information. Secondly, we would move on to have a discussion about what somebody's wishes were, right? What is your precise direction as to what you want us to do as a funeral provider, right? We have that discussion and say, okay, obviously, traditionally in the Jewish faith, folks are buried in, a Jewish cemetery. So that brings up a whole other topic of subjects. Okay, do you own a plot, right? Do you own that individually, or is somebody from your family perhaps buried there before you? Now, if you do own a plot, another subject which can be difficult at the time of need, and it's kind of important to have beforehand, would be, is that plot within a burial society, right? Some of these burial societies, and Kim, this is probably a good thing for you to speak about. Some of these burial societies go back, 100 years, even longer than that. So to be able to find me as a funeral director, in order to bury somebody in a specific burial plot in a cemetery that's governed by a burial society, at times can be very difficult when you're trying to find, Seymour Morrison, who last known address was in Queens in 1993, when the last burial in that society ground was. So those little detail, and at the time of somebody's passing too, keep in mind, as a funeral director, we have maybe, 36 hours to put this all together and to contact this individual and to contact the cemetery and put all these pieces together to do a timely burial in traditional, fashion of Judaism. So those details regarding cemetery, I would highlight as important for sure. So really good thing to get in order in regard to burial plots. I mentioned out-of-state things. I'm not sure if everybody is full-time local in today's world. Many folks may, snowbird, go to Florida, go to South Carolina. Many people even move out of the area, right? I mean, New Jersey in these days, not necessarily the easiest place, to spend retirement. So we've been seeing a lot of people who have relocated out of state, but indeed their wishes are to be, buried here with their family members, right? To come home to New Jersey. So, that's something to keep in mind too. That can definitely cause not difficulty or problems, but certainly could add to the time frame of when burial can take place, right? So definitely worth mentioning, definitely worth having some type of foresight about and putting some type of plan into place in circumstances like that is nothing but beneficial for sure, for sure. Details specific to, the Jewish faith, right? And Rabbi is going to share with us some of the more details about these traditions, why they're important. But I mean, specific to the Jewish faith, shrouding, is the individual going to be shrouding? Yes, it is in the Judaism tradition. Tahara, right? The traditional washing and shrouding of the deceased. That happens at the funeral home. Many people are unfamiliar with it. What is it? I could tell you what's done. I'm sure Rabbi can explain, the significance of the tradition better than I can. So he's going to share with us a little bit about that. Shomer, another that would be an individual who comes to our funeral home, spends the time praying over the deceased the evening before a burial. Again, I could tell you what it is. Rabbi can share a little bit more as to, the traditional significance of that. But these are all decisions that you, as a client, right, as someone who wants to pre-plan their funeral, these are all things that you would need to make decisions about. These would be things that I would be asking you about as you're sitting in my office around the table with me. Have you thought about having a shower? What are your thoughts about Tahara? Do you want mom to be shrouded? These are all things that are tradition in the Jewish faith. So these are all things that I would encourage you, to think about as you move forward. Another good thing that I should mention, there are burial benefits for veterans, right? Military veterans. These benefits can be anything from being buried in a veteran cemetery, right? But also, at Beth Israel, other Jewish cemeteries, the VA would include not a headstone, but a grave marker at no cost to the individual. This would be a flat 2-foot by 1-foot grave marker that is at no cost to a veteran or his family, though cemeteries do have fees to install those, right? But the actual marker is of no cost to the family. Typically, too, military honors can be issued at the cemetery at a graveside. Those honors would be consisting of, and some of you probably have seen them at funerals, but active duty military who comes out, they come to the graveside or to our funeral home, and they would present an American flag to the next of kin. They would play taps, and they would also fold that American flag in the appropriate fashion. Typically, a casket may be draped prior to the in-ground burial, and then taken off. Honors would be issued, and then the in-ground burial would continue. In order for a funeral director to apply for any type of military honor, or military benefit, a funeral director would need a copy of somebody's honorable discharge, also known as and or a DD 214, right? Without that document, we would not be able to proceed. Well, I'm mistaken. There is a chance that you could still obtain those benefits without that document, though it's, you know, we get reports of records being lost in a fire in St. Louis back in 1962. I don't know if anybody here has ever tried to get a replacement. It's not the easiest thing in the world. So, but with that document, we can go ahead and submit an application for a number of different military, you know, veteran benefits. So something also to keep in mind, and maybe, you know, put in that file of, you know, these are, you know, my wishes. This is the result of my discussion with Gleason's or my discussion with our funeral director, you know, copies of whatever paperwork that we, you know, that a funeral director may have given to you, all your vital information. And let's not forget, in today's day and age, passwords, right? Usernames, passwords, write them down, give them to your, I'm going to say give them to your kids, but give them to somebody you trust, copies of them, you know? I mean, what happens? You know, what happens? All of a sudden, you know, a tragedy happens. And then, you know, what if it is just your children who are left? You know, God forbid, but these things do happen. Believe me, we see it, you know, we see it. What then? You know, your kids have, or the people you trust have none of your information. I mean, it's so important. It's so important. Of course, there's an aspect of funeral service discussion also. I don't know if anybody who is joining us is outside the world of Judaism here today, but that's a whole other discussion. You know, what decisions, you know, are you going to make? Is there going to be any type of viewing, or is there going to be any type of, you know, cremation? But, you know, that's a whole different discussion. And if anybody here has questions about that, you could certainly ask us after we conclude, you know, and we're available to answer any questions. So, second topic that I would like to go into, well, let me just backtrack a little bit. So that would be the process kind of pre-planning a funeral, right? Now, what if you say, okay, Billy, so we've made these plans, you've explained everything, thank you, you know, everything's clear as to how things would proceed once somebody passes and what is needed, right? Then you say, you know, we want to go ahead and we want to pre-fund a funeral for me and my spouse. Okay, great. So here in the state of New Jersey, okay, which we're very lucky, the consumer is safeguarded to an extreme extent here in the state of New Jersey. We have very good laws that are put in place to protect the consumer. Other states out there, not so much. But here in New Jersey, we have something called a prepaid funeral trust fund. It's state-governed funeral trust fund, okay? It's governed by the New Jersey State Funeral Directors Association. And this fund is worth almost $1 billion at this point. It's up past $900 million in assets. FDIC insured, your money is secured there. So in other words, why does this prepaid funeral trust fund exist, right? And what are the laws in New Jersey that protect the consumer? So here in New Jersey, you cannot say, Billy, we're going to pre-fund our funeral. Here you go. Here's the, you know, the $9,000 or $12,000, the $15,000 it's going to cost to do my funeral. Here's a check written to Gleason's. Thanks so much. Can't do it. Okay. So I, as a funeral director here in New Jersey, cannot accept any type of payment, right, until my services are provided, until the actual death care is provided. Okay. Yes, I mean, what I do with pre-planning and pre-funding funerals is a service, right? But we cannot get paid for that in New Jersey. We can only accept payment once somebody passes, right? So in order to pre-fund a funeral, we have to go to an outside source, which is where this the New Jersey State Prepaid Funeral Trust comes in. Okay, so the funds are put in there, they're secure. At the time of somebody's passing, I then put an application in to claim those funds and then distribute those funds to not only Gleason Funeral Home, but perhaps to Beth Israel Cemetery. You can pre-fund cemetery expenses. Perhaps for obituaries, you can pre-fund the expenses for an obituary to run in the Star Ledger and the Home News Tribune or what have you. You can pre-fund the fees that may be incurred by the Shever Kadisha who perform the Tahara and provide a shomer and do the shrouding of the deceased. So all those things that are involved expense-wise with a funeral can be pre-funded, right? There are two ways to do this in the state of New Jersey, and this again comes down to certain legalities. Number one, you can open what is called a revocable funeral trust, right? Meaning that after we met, we come upon a total for what the funeral would be, write a check out to this funeral trust fund in the state of New Jersey, and they could be placed in a revocable trust, right? Funds are put aside, they're gaining interest, but those funds would still be in your name, right? So you could actually choose to take that money back at any given time. It's still considered an asset of yours, okay, which is good. Now, that may at some point become an obstacle. I don't know if anybody who's with us has ever had the experience of having to apply for New Jersey State Medicaid and their process of how funds need to be spent prior to qualifying for that state assistance, right? Leads us to another avenue of pre-funding, which would be the opposite of revocable, an irrevocable trust, meaning that these funds, once put into an irrevocable trust, are no longer considered an asset of that individual, okay? Meaning that you're utilizing someone's funds to pre-fund their funeral, but those funds can only ever be spent on that individual's funeral. So long story short is, you know, you're taking mom's applicable funds that are available, you're making this deposit into a funeral trust, right? And you're using the funds now for something that you could utilize later to fund her funeral. And they're not considered an asset of the individual, so Medicaid cannot attach themselves to those funds, right? Because that's kind of, you know, what Medicaid requires. I don't know if anyone has ever had to go through that process, but that's a whole nother topic of legalities and look back and such like that, more so for an attorney than me. But it is a good tool when we talk about utilizing someone's funds, the requirements of Medicaid, and still being able to fund their funeral, right? So I'll also share with you about my establishment and what our policy is on pre-funding funerals. Some people would ask, like, well, you know, Bill, is there actually a benefit to pre-funding a funeral in any way? Because, you know, Susan and I have life insurance policies. We were thinking maybe that we'll just utilize them when we pass to fund our funeral, which is fine too. That works indeed. My answer to that question would be the benefit of pre-funding a funeral, at least with Gleason Funeral Home. This isn't with everybody else. Many funeral homes do not do this. But at our place, if you were to pre-fund a funeral with us and have it paid in full, we would guarantee at the time of one's passing, there would be no out-of-pocket expenses for the Gleason Funeral Home. We would accept what's in the trust, right? Because that trust is gaining interest through the years, right? Right now, it's at about 1.8%. So the idea is that the increase in the fund, you know, the interest it takes, we would take that interest to cover our price increases, right? So whatever was in the trust, you know, good Lord willing, 25 years down the road, we accept as being paid in full. Now, what we don't use that interest to cover would be the price increases of Beth Israel Cemetery, the price increases of any type of third party, like obituary or, you know, Shepherd Kadisha or death certificates. So long story short, you know, we take the interest first to cover our price increases. And, you know, if there is a balance due to the cemetery, you know, one would have to come out of pocket for that stuff. Just because it's beyond our control, you know. I know how much I raise my prices once every 18 months to 24 months. And I know, you know, 99% of the time, this trust and the interest that it provides cover our price increases indeed. So, you know, if someone were to ask me that question, that would be my answer. What is the benefit of pre-funding? That would be the benefit, you know, is that you're basically paying today's pricing for, you know, a funeral, hopefully, you know, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, right? So yeah, I think that's what I would have to tell you as, you know, crucial points about pre-planning a funeral and pre-funding a funeral. Those are the real important things that I would get to right now. But once somebody passes, again, you know, we could have this all set up. Does that necessarily mean that that is going to be what happens? No, it does not. Which is pretty shocking, right? You could literally arrange your own funeral. Does that mean that it's legal? No, it doesn't. So I'm going to move on to the next topic, which is in today's day and age, I find to be absolutely crucial, right? And that would be called the right to control. Who has the right to control your funeral, right? Because it's not you. Unfortunately. So I'll move on to that. And you know, as I said, if you have questions about, you know, pre-planning, pre-funding, anything that I touched on, you know, once we wrap up, you know, Joel, myself, Liam, we're here to answer whatever questions and, you know, whatever you need, you know, please, you know, take the opportunity and we can have one-on-one discussion or group discussion about it, whatever it is you need. So again, legally, let's start out legally in New Jersey. Who can make funeral arrangements, right? Who's legally responsible? Who do I have to listen to? Who's going to be my boss, right? So standard operation in a perfect world, right, where everything runs real smooth, it would be your spouse, it would be your children, child, perhaps a brother, perhaps nephew, niece, if you don't have any children of your own, right? It would be kinship. That's how the New Jersey state law reads. First and foremost, it's kin. And the direction of kin, as I said, spouse, children, parent, perhaps, God forbid. And then you move on to extended family like brother, sister, nieces, nephews, and cousins, and so on, right? They would be legally the people who can arrange a funeral. With children, number one, it would be a majority. So you could have, if there's 4 children, there could be a problem, right? And I've seen it. It happens, you know. I mean, we all know, you know, like, you know, every family, you know, has whatever, has issues, you know. But let's just say there are 4 children. 2 children want to have mom buried in Beth Israel. 2 children want mom to be buried out in New Montefiore with her parents. Okay, we have a problem. And I say, you know, well, you guys got to figure it out. It's not up. I can't tell you what to do, right? It's a problem. As I said, surviving parents, if an individual is unmarried, no children of legal age, they would have responsibility. Majority of siblings, just as a majority of children, if they're the closest kin, the majority would have to make a decision. And then we get to those circumstances where there are no surviving relatives, right? Maybe a nice couple never had children, Both were only children themselves. They were only child. And they literally have, you know, nobody to handle this responsibility. What do? You know, who gives the direction? So here in New Jersey, and let's face it too, in today's times, right? People are all spread out. You know, there's kids who are in Seattle, kids who are in Texas, kids who may be out of the country. You know, what's going to happen when, you know, somebody does pass and we're tasked to have burial done within 48 hours? You know, things to think about, you know. Is there somebody else local that you may want to handle those types of decisions at that time? And of course, maybe, you know, maybe James can get a flight in 48 hours from Seattle, but is he going to be able to get, you know, to the funeral director to make the funeral arrangements, you know, within a few hours so we could do a timely burial, you know? So I think in today's world, it's very important to think of those factors. You know, who is it that, you know, these responsibilities are going to fall on? And in New Jersey, I guess it was back, is there a date on here, Joel? What would you say? Probably around 2017, 2015, where the right to control, you know, came out.
It's about that, yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
So, yeah, here in New Jersey, a number of years back, and I don't know, Judge, maybe you can help me with the date. Maybe it was 2015 funeral representative
I think it
law,
was.
right? I'd say almost 10 years ago now. There was a law that was passed that allows, with proper documentation, of course, for really anybody that you wish to be directed as your specific funeral representative. Okay, it does require documentation. It requires proper language in a will, right? The specific proper language. It can't just say that this is my executor and these are my wishes. Okay, your executor has nothing to do with your funeral choices, nothing at all. Your executor is there to follow out the directives of the will, period, right? Make sure things are just, you know, distributed the way you wanted them. Nothing to do with making decisions about your funeral. So New Jersey did pass a law, as I said, about 10 years ago, that allows you to give someone specifically the right to control. This person can be the executor of your will, right? But just because someone's an executor, again, does not give them that legal right. It has to be specified that they are put in that position. Could be a family member, could be, you know, clergy, could be a close friend, just needs to be witnessed and notarized, right? And it is a legal document, you know, from the Attorney General's office on their letterhead that it would have to be on. Or of course, your attorney could put a codicil, is that it, Judge? To your will, in addition, codicil to the will. Yeah, it could be put in addition, you know, as a, you know, a codicil to your will. But it is seriously easy as, you know, 2 pages, and we have copies of these if you should need them, you know. And this would legally place somebody, you know, as your directive, as your funeral representative, and nothing supersedes this. Even if, you know, there is kinship who's still alive, if you have this document and it's a friend or a cousin or somebody you trust and you put them in charge of it, nothing can override it. Your children can't override it. Your brother can't override, your spouse can't override it. Okay. So yeah, in today's world, I think that this is one of the major things that people should think about and have executed and put with your, you know, your legal files for sure. Funeral representative cannot be a funeral director, okay, nor can it be any employee of any funeral home or cemetery, anything like that. One other thing that I'll go through just in regard to some legalities that I think are important when we talk about these terms, right? Again, executor for a will, that's totally separate from funeral service and funeral decision making, unless you have that executor of your will as your funeral representative as well. Power of attorney. Please know that any power of attorney that you have, people tell me this all the time. They call up, they say, oh, you know, mom had a son, but she hasn't talked to him in, 28 years, and he's in Texas, and she's actually my stepmom, but I have a power of attorney, so I need to make funeral arrangements. They said, well, you know, unfortunately, your power of attorney ceases at death. So unfortunately, you have no legal right to make funeral arrangements. I do need to get in touch with mom's legal son who lives in Texas or whoever it may be, right? So an important point, you know, just to be clear about legalities and who has the power to make decisions. So yeah, I would encourage you to think about this stuff. I think everything that I mentioned is of importance, but decision making at the time, right to control, is becoming of increasing importance as time goes on. So I really would encourage you to think about who you trust making those decisions and following out whatever wishes that you do have. As I said, you know, we're going to be available after we conclude here to answer whatever questions you have. And honestly, folks, I mean, over at my place, we go through, you know, pre-arrangements with families 2 to 3 times a week. You know, I mean, I'm sure it feels a little funny, but believe it or not, like, we do it 2 to 3 times a week. It happens all the time. So don't feel, you know, shy about it, or, you know, we do it, like I said, you know, all the time. And we have those answers to those questions that you might have. So we're just here to give you information, whatever we can do to help. We'll be glad to once we conclude. Other than that, I guess, Rabbi, I'll turn the mic over to you. Sure. Great.
Thank you, Bill.
You bet.
Let me just start by saying that if you want your funeral to be arranged in a manner that puts you as more than a customer, then you really want to go with Gleason Funeral Home. That is my experience. And it's an experience that's not based on 1 year, it's now 17, 18 years. So people sometimes think, oh, well, I want to go with menorah or Sinai. I got to tell you that just because somebody is using a Jewish word as their title does not mean that they do a better job of the Jewish rituals. Remember that everything that is Jewish, that's on me. I cooperate with Gleason's Funeral Home, but they know a lot of our traditions. They know when to ask the right questions, that kind of thing. All right. So regarding my presentation, we're going to look at the 3 S's. The 3 S's are they are speed, sanctity, and simplicity. Speed. You may have noticed that in Jewish life, particularly if you've been to a traditional Seder or to Shabbat services, speed is not exactly our highest priority. We're more than happy to take as much of your time as possible. But that does not hold true when somebody dies. When somebody dies, the tradition is to be buried not exactly in 48 hours, although that is the practical answer. It's to be buried as soon as possible. So if you are in Jerusalem, the custom there is that you are buried immediately, even if it's in the middle of the night, you are buried right away. Before we had the phenomenon of everybody moving to all corners of the globe, it was the standard was 24 hours, and in an Orthodox community, it still is 24 hours with no flexibility. And in our community, I will extend it to 48 hours because there are things that come up in terms of people getting plane tickets and just getting here. The main issue is that it be done as soon as possible. And there are two reasons for the speed that we want. One is for the honor of the dead. We do not want anything unpleasant to happen to the body before it is buried. And so speed is of the essence. The other part is that as long as the body is unburied, that is the hardest time on the mourner because that is just an open wound. I think that's really the best way of looking at it, actually, that when you have a bad cut on your hand, the worst time is until you get the stitches and the bandages that you need to cover it. So while you have this open emotional wound, if that goes on for a long time, that is only going to hurt everybody in the family. All right, next topic is sanctity. Sanctity or holiness. Specifically, the sanctity or holiness of the body. You know, in adult education, we were just discussing this very topic. And if a siddur, say, is damaged or is worn out, what do we do with it? We bury it. Why? God's name is in it, and so therefore it is a sacred object. That would, of course, make it different from, say, a Yiddish novel that you may have on your shelf somewhere that can be thrown away. Same with a kippah. A kippah can be thrown away because, look, it's just a hat. All right. But when it comes to items that are terribly sacred, those do get buried. And that is therefore all the more so true with a human body. A human body contains that which is sacred, the soul. And so, for instance, if one of our Torah covers were to become damaged beyond repair, that also would have to be buried. Doesn't matter that it doesn't have a Torah in it. The body, the cover of the thing that is sacred has to be buried. So it's the same with the body. The body has to be honored and buried because it contains within it that which is sacred. So that means that there are things that we do and things that we do not do. We do not cremate. And the simple reason is that that is a destruction of something that is holy. Just as you would not burn a siddur or a Torah or any of our holy implements, so too we do not burn the human body. It is essentially treating it like garbage, and we don't do that. I'm sure you're all aware that there have been far too many cremations of Jewish bodies already that were not wanted, so that is something that we don't do. We therefore bury in earth. We bury in earth because that completes the cycle of life. That is what God said to Adam, that you came from the earth and to the earth you shall return. Sometimes people ask me about mausoleums. Mausoleums are technically permitted, at least in my opinion, because you are essentially buried in earth. The concrete around you is earth. So it's not something that I recommend or encourage, but if it's something that is important to you, that's a point where I can be flexible. So there are some other aspects of sanctity. We'll talk about the tahara. Why do we do the tahara? It's the ritual washing of the body. It's for that very same reason. The body, even when it is dead, is not garbage. It is to be treated with respect and awe. And that's the reason that we wash the body. Same thing with having shmirah, with a shomer. The shomer means guard in Hebrew. We guard the body, not just so that you're not alone in those last hours. And yes, I know you're not aware that you're alone during those last hours, but that's not the point. The point is that your body, again, it's not the recyclables that you put out the night before and you don't think about them again. It's not like that at all. It is something that until the body is buried, it is an item of awesome sanctity, and therefore it should be guarded. Let's move on to simplicity. Simplicity is a very important aspect of traditional Jewish burial. There was a time, we're talking thousands of years ago now, when the rich had very, very fancy funerals and caskets, and they had musical performances, and they would hire women to do the wailing that used to be, if you've ever seen a traditional Muslim funeral, you may be about that, la, 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 that kind of thing. Well, that used to be part of ours as well, and people would hire women to do that, and that means that at the time that meant that the poor were sort of okay, here's your hole, okay, bye, and the rich were given this lavish send-off. Our laws developed in such a way that no longer happens. Whether you are rich, middle class, or poor, you get the same kind of funeral. Death is the great equalizer. And while in life we encourage people to express their individuality, you want this kind of car, go ahead, get that kind of car. You want this kind of house, go ahead. If you can afford it, get that nice house. But when you're no longer part of this world, that is a time to not be an individual. You are now part of you're now part of the other world. And so that means that you get a simple casket, you are shrouded, and really when I say that this is about simplicity, I think a better way to say it, this didn't start with S, is you can't take it with you. That's really what it's about. As my father-in-law often says, burial shrouds do not have pockets. There is whatever it is that you think you want to take with you. When you get to the gates, they don't accept any baggage. So it's and that's really just the essence of the simplicity of it all, because you spent your entire life not being simple. Life is not simple. Life is complicated. This is a time for once in our lives for it to be simple and modest. Do you have questions about specific Jewish rituals that I haven't addressed or that I need to address again? Yes. The Tahara, okay. At Gleason, the Tahara is done by a Chevra Kadisha out of Brooklyn. I've never met them. I just know that it is, I was going to say I know his name, but I've forgotten. It's Rabbi Benedict. Rabbi Benedict, yeah.
Jewish Sacred Society out of I think it's Kew Garden, Queens.
Yes.
Yeah, Rabbi Benedict is the gentleman who oversees it.
Is that extra fee included in our fee pay, or?
They do have their own fees.
Add-on, doesn't add on.
They have their own fees, yeah. It has, yeah, that's a third party, totally separate from us.
But I think it's the kind of thing that I don't think it's an enormous cost.
Modest.
It's in the low hundreds, I think.
Yeah, $100 for the shepherd to come and Shomar, they charge by the shift. $100 every 4 hours or something of that nature.
Okay, so we're talking about the kind of money you would spend for two at an extremely good restaurant, something like that. I mean, Naomi and I once, because we had a gift certificate, we ran up a $300 bill at a just okay restaurant, so kosher, that's why. Yeah. It would have been $100 at a non. Yes.
An academic question. During the Second World War, the Jewish seamen lost their lives. Was burying at sea considered an acceptable tradition?
Burial at sea is acceptable in the sense that if it happens, we do not go get you and redo it. That is the Jewish version of it. That is b'diavad, which means if it's done, if it has already been done, well, what can you do? But no, we would not sanction that as something that you would do on purpose. Yeah. Yes.
What happens when a person dies just before Shabbat?
When a person dies just before Shabbat, then we do not bury on Shabbat because there are so many things that have to be done that can't be done on Shabbat. And so then most likely it would take place on Sunday.
But then somebody's sitting at the body, how does that work?
You know what? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I don't know, Mrs. Green, to tell you the truth. I guess the timing of which would be crucial. If Rabbi Benedict were to think that he'd be able to get a shomer to our facility prior to sundown, I'm sure he would. If it was at sundown, then, I don't think they would be able to accommodate. Unless they were able to get some type of, transit, or maybe they take the train from the city and we pick up from New Brunswick, the individual. I don't know. The timing would be crucial. I mean, you're talking about a specific, 3-hour window, where it would just have to fall that way. I can't say that necessarily.
Practically speaking, I think the answer is that the family would provide the shomer itself. And I know that I've done this for some families here, that you just volunteer your own time until such time as the shomer can come in. Yes.
Speaking to that, what happens with the washing of the body if it's too close to sundown?
They would come, I've had the shepherd come the morning of the funeral.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, it can still be accommodating. It's just a matter of time.
Okay.
I don't think Temple Bethel has ever had its own Chevra Kadisha, have we? I was not.
I know,
Yeah. Yeah, Temple Shalom does have one. And many congregations do. It's just a question of that, the place's comfort with it, and whatever the tradition of that place was. Some people hire it out, and some people do it themselves. I myself have only done it once. I mean, it was required in the program that I went through, but
I have a question.
yes.
Hi. Len and I have done our pre-funeral guidance with Bill. But I was surprised to just learn right now that if we really want our wishes to be carried out, we need that legal document. And I'm concerned mostly with we bought rather modest caskets, and one of my sons is kind of showy, and I can imagine him changing it, and I don't want all that wealth to be in the ground. I'd rather it be given to charitable, if he really wants to spend the money, to give to a charitable organization. So I would really need that document. I guess this is a question for Bill. I'm sorry, Rabbi. I would really need that, right?
Yeah. How are you?
Good. Hi, Bill.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing for anybody to have. I think it's a good thing to have on file. Just in case, let's hope that obviously you don't have to refer to it. Yeah, it's worth having on file for sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to send you a copy or email you a copy. It's simple. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I think we need that. But I guess there's this showiness in this world. It's fine on weddings and bar mitzvahs, but to have it wasted in the ground is really disturbing to me.
Oh, yes, simplicity is, as Rabbi said, yeah. Yeah, just send me an email. I could send you over a copy of it. It's real easy. It just does need to be notarized and witnessed. And then, you know, with whomever that you'd like to be in charge, you know. And just a thought, while we are speaking of it, perhaps it should be someone other than your spouse. You know, if you and your spouse are traveling and something were to happen, then it's null and void anyhow, you know?
Yeah.
So just a
Yeah.
thought.
I learned that too. Didn't know that a power of attorney goes away. Didn't know that.
So
Thank
the
you.
last thing I'll address is the stone, about, you can put up the stone, after Shloshim for 30 days. In practice, it never happens that way because these monuments take quite a bit of time, to make. But that would be, I think, the one aspect of Jewish mourning that where you could have some individuality. It's going to cost you, but if you want to have some sort of final expression of your individuality on a stone, that would be acceptable. Mine will say, "What are you looking at?" All right. With that, yes, Mark.
Go back to what Bill was saying in the beginning, if plans weren't made in advance, you know, per se, and you come to a situation where maybe you have two children, one says one thing, one says the other thing, what do you do in terms of that? How do you handle the situation?
Well, that's why you need that paper.
Exactly. If there is none, I sit there with my arms crossed and I say, well, you guys, I'm not here to get in between you two, so if you need to step outside and go around. Well, yeah, I mean, you know, hence this document, really, you know?
Yes, Si.
I think it would be a good idea for both the funeral home and you, Rabbi, to have an application that fills out, that you have to fill out all the areas that we discussed. In other words, someone passed away. And the application for the funeral home you already have, with all the answers written down in that specific way. Also, the people that are calling up, someone just passed away, there's a little bit of turmoil at that point. If it's written down, what they do, they call you first, call the funeral home. How is that done by someone that's crying and very upset?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, and does the funeral have all the information? Based upon what we have discussed. How would I use?
Unless a declaration of death is needed, I think in which case you would need somebody who can do that, whether it's a doctor, paramedic, whatever. The first person you call is Gleason, I think.
Yeah, depending on circumstances, yeah.
Right.
You know, that's the essence of, you know, making an appointment to come to us and put it all on paper to begin with. You know, like that's the essence of what I was saying, like, that's why it's important to have it all on paper. You know, that's what we do when you come to see us and do pre-arrangements. Correct. We would have it all documented, you know, at the time of someone's passing away. Thank you.
But now there's some things that came up, I'm not sure, so we're gonna have another meeting.
That's fine too.
Thank you. Let me just add,
Yeah, you break.
We'll get to Judy and then Joel. Judy?
Because that fund is sitting here
Is that the price that you would pay when, I mean, let's say.
Correct.
Prices have gone up.
As long as it's paid in full at the time,
Okay.
we guarantee that price at the time of death.
What happens if, for whatever reason, we can't be buried at Gleason and do that fund?
Right,
Did you get that money back, or do you? use that-
well, again, right, there's two types of funds. Number one, there's a revocable fund, which you can get the funds back. And there's an irrevocable trust, which you cannot get back. But the fact of the matter is that you haven't paid Gleason Funeral Home anything regardless. So if it's an irrevocable account, those funds could be used at any funeral home in the nation. It doesn't have to be used at Gleason Funeral Home.
But does it have, suppose for whatever reason, you get buried in the street or something like that? And that money is no more for funeral, do you get that money back?
If it's a revocable trust, yes. If it's irrevocable, you would not be able to get it back. It must be spent on funeral services. And it's utilized, right? The reason why that is because most times people utilize it in preparation for Medicaid acceptance, right? They're taking those funds that otherwise would have gone to the state of New Jersey or someone's long-term health care.
Yeah.
And instead of putting it towards long-term health care, they're putting it into a trust account that is irrevocable, meaning that it's no longer an asset of that individual and it can't be returned to that individual, right? Again, you're not paying the Gleason Funeral Home. We're helping you come up with a figure of what those specific funeral costs would be and deposit those figures into that trust.
Okay,
Yes, Betsy.
now I have a question, okay. So you're buried at sea, you have an irrevocable trust. Can that money be used for someone else's?
No.
So it doesn't, it's gone.
Because again, the reason it went into
I understand.
irrevocable,
Yeah, I understand that.
the state of New Jersey gets whatever is not spent on an irrevocable trust.
Right.
It goes to the state of New Jersey and the Medicaid services.
Okay,
My father happened to pass away on Rosh Hashanah Eve.
Okay,
It was a Friday night, and his funeral was not till Monday.
Yep.
God forbid, one of us were to pass away on Shabbos or a holiday. You come out right away, are you available 24/7?
indeed,
Call you so that someone would answer if we call and you can come.
indeed, we've done it. We've done it all too many times, believe me.
Yes.
This is what it's
Yeah.
tough that weekend, getting through this holiday.
Yeah, we're available. I mean, that's the nature of our work, you know, and it is me and my staff
Right.
that actually respond. You know, it's not a third party, yeah, like we're there.
I have a question also.
If we get the revocable trust and it's put in, this is only for the state of New Jersey, correct?
No, you'd be able, let's say you were to move to Florida or South Carolina or San Diego.
Okay,
Those funds that are in the New Jersey State Trust are transferable anywhere to be used on funeral services.
now, if the person, passes, if they are out of state at that time, would that cost then be added on to the cost of a pre-planned?
If it was not originally figured into the original price quotation, so to speak, then yes, it would have to be added in. And those are expenses that, in addition to our own, we would have additional expenses from an out-of-state funeral provider who'd be responsible to file the certain transit permits so we could book a flight, obtain death certificates, the removal of the deceased from their place of death, transfers to the airport as well, right? The airfare, right? So you're talking out-of-state deaths are a little bit more complicated, as I mentioned. I kind of just briefed on the topic. But, you know, it does happen. It happens all the time where somebody passes in Florida. My own father passed in Florida. You know, I flew down there, I took care of him physically, and then, you know, got him back to New Jersey. My folks were residents in Bradenton, you know, outside of Sarasota. It happens all the time. Is it something you necessarily account for? No, maybe not, you know, maybe as time goes on, you spend more and more time in South Carolina or Florida or Georgia, wherever it might be. So yes, those additional expenses, if they weren't accounted for, they would have to be added on at the time. I mean, it's, you know, pretty.
Joel, did you have a comment you wanted to?
I just wanted to expand on something that Bill had said about it being a little bit uncomfortable or scary coming down and talk to us. That's all you have to do is pick up the phone. You don't have to, be held to any kind of obligation. We can just make an appointment, sit down and talk over a couple of different options. We're pretty friendly over there.
You're very friendly. Actually, you're a lot.
I feel a whole lot better.
Yeah.
Talking with you, you know, Bill.
A lot of it's the fear of the unknown, once you meet with one of them, and I meet on the cemetery, and once you meet with someone and you just get those unknowns answered for you, you realize it's not as scary, it gives you that peace of mind, just knowing it's done, taken care of, you don't have to decide it.
Yeah, you don't have to bring your checkbook with you. You can come down and say, listen, we have 3 different ideas. What are the costs of each? And you can take them home. We'll give you estimates on anything that you can come up with, maybe even, help guide you a little bit. But you can take it home and think it over and then call us back and say, Joel, Bill, Mark, Anthony, like to come down and we can't do a decision. We'd like to put it all on paper. So be it. So, but it doesn't have to be first visit.
We'll take 2 more questions and then I want to give Kim a chance to speak. Yes.
Can you make payments towards this, or you need the full amount?
No, you can definitely make payments for it, yeah.
Okay,
Just the one thing that I will say,
until it's paid.
until it's paid,
Right.
and I can't guarantee the price
Right.
until it's fully funded.
Right. Okay.
And yes, last question was over here. No? Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes.
real quick, can you do a little piece on unveiling and what is crucial about the timing of an unveiling? I mean, does it have to be on the anniversary? Can it be after? What's the ideal, the tradition of
The
unveiling?
unveiling ceremony actually was invented in America. It's not a traditional sort of thing. It's just and the main reason for that is that in Europe, where there's so little cemetery space there they stack caskets.
Okay.
And there would just be an addition on the stone as to who's there. So there's no grand, look at my stone.
Right.
It's you're part of a family stone. And it can be done any time after the 30th day. So, and it does not have to be directly on any particular day. It cannot be on Shabbat, of course. As you know, sometimes there are delays of up to 2 years because of the pandemic. I mean, some of these stones just did not get done. And so it should be done in a timely manner. But when it gets done, it gets done. Kim, please.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi, and thank you, Bill, for letting me attend today. So my name's Kim. I am a family service manager for Beth Israel Cemetery. And Temple Bethel has a large portion of land that they purchased through the cemetery for all of their members. Anyone that does not already have a space that is interested in purchasing a space, you can see, I believe, Rabbi, right? They would go to you for that? Yeah. And, to be in that exact area. So one of the things that I wanted to touch on is kind of pertaining again to the pre-planning of when the time comes. Other than purchasing the space or the grave in advance, the cemetery allows all of our families to prepay what's called the interment fee. That is the opening and closing of the grave. So it's one of the third-party expenses that Bill had mentioned that he cannot guarantee the cost. You can guarantee the price with us through the cemetery. So if you already have a space or you don't, that's something that we can guarantee the price of, that you can make, get today's price, you can make payments on it, and we cannot touch those funds until the time of the burial takes place. So it alleviates one third-party expense that way. Just to kind of piggyback off of the unveiling topic as well, at our cemetery, We do require at least 6 months before the stone can be installed. The reason being is we want to make sure we give the ground time to settle. Okay, so we don't want to have it installed too early and potentially have it sink, fall, anything of that nature. Does anyone here have space through the temple at Beth Israel? Okay, perfect, good. So if you'd like, once we're done, I can get your information just to pull your files to see if you've already taken care of that interment fee, or if you have not. I can help you with that as well, but just to make sure everything's in order, because it does go up in price quite a bit frequently, so I would recommend taking care of it. The other thing I would say, regardless of what cemetery you choose on, having your burial take place in, definitely call and make sure that everything's taken care of. A lot of times families will say, oh yeah, I have a space at, X, Y, and Z cemetery. My grandparents purchased it 50 some odd years ago. And then when the time comes, there's all this legal paperwork that needs to be taken care of, and it can delay things. It can cause turmoil within the families. I know you guys see it just as much as we see it, with families being torn apart. So definitely give a call to the cemetery. Make sure that there's no documents that need to be signed by anyone prior to the burial taking place. Again, it's not a fun topic, but the more that you get taken care of in advance, the more answers that you have, the easier it gets. When I meet with families that are pre-planning, I genuinely look at it as teaching. I'm just there to educate you on this aspect of life. We all plan and pay for things like fire insurance, flood insurance, homeowners insurance, this, that, and the other. This is the one thing that is a definite in all of our lives, and too many families unfortunately don't plan for it. So I do recommend every family, even if it doesn't matter what your financial state is. In fact, those who have the least amount of money while living absolutely should pre-plan. It'll alleviate a lot of heartache for those that are left behind. So once we're done here, again, anyone that has questions that are cemetery related, those who have spaces with us, I'll happily answer. Yes.
Could you hand out or just tell us telephone number to reach you?
Yeah, I'll give you my card. That way you can reach me directly, of course. Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about mausoleum?
Sure. Are you okay with that, Rabbi? Okay. So at Beth Israel, we have 2 strictly Jewish mausoleums, and we have our 3rd one on the way. It should have been built by now, but the pandemic delayed that as well. So the nice thing about mausoleum is it's all inclusive. So what I mean by that is within ground, you have to purchase the grave, then you have to buy, depending on the situation, a burial vault or a liner. You have to pay for the stone or the marker. There's a lot that goes into it. For lack of a better phrase, I call it a la carte. Whereas for mausoleum, everything's included. So most of the time, you're going to pay us more upfront for mausoleum than you will when you purchase the grave. But you have to remember that that's all inclusive. Okay, so in the long run, it does end up usually being more economical choice. The rabbi is still there, and we still do everything traditionally the way it's done at the grave site. So I'd be more than happy, anyone that is interested in mausoleum, I can give you a tour. There have been families, along with the permission of the deceased family, who have sat in on services to see and kind of have those questions answered and to see what it's like. So I'd happily talk to you more about that in detail. Any other questions? Sure.
Have a cemetery plot with people that I can't find my paperwork.
That's okay. I can help you with it. Yeah, I'll get your name when we're done. That we keep all of that. It's the funeral director's call. They always hear us refer to the vault. It's a huge 2-story vault, fireproof. We keep it locked up. So don't worry, I can help you. Yes.
Can you quote any prices now?
Honestly, I can't, because it truly does depend on exactly where in the cemetery it's located. If it's in the Temple Bethel section, Rabbi can definitely assist you with that. I would need to get a little more information from you and what your needs and wants are to really give you a more accurate quote, because it ranges from a couple thousand on up. So I don't want to give you this crazy range. I'd rather give you something more accurate.
That means penthouse or first floor?
Potentially. Location. Yes. With Beth Israel? I've been with Beth Israel now for 4 years. I live in Toms River, so I commute an hour to work. Prior to being at Beth Israel, I worked down in Toms River for cemeteries.
I'm really happy that you came here and that you spoke. I'm an attorney, retired. However, I've had a lot of contact with our temple cemetery over the years. There was a period where suddenly we couldn't get any contact at Beth Israel. And we had to contact some company in the state of Washington that was handling matters for Bethel because of transition. And we were having problems. Now I can gather that we're here along our issue. Last time I had a problem was probably 20 years ago.
So unfortunately, we haven't had the best reputation when it comes to family service and taking care of families the way we should in terms of timely responses and alleviating any issues or concerns. So that is something that we're striving to improve upon. We're slowly getting there. It's going to take quite some time, in my opinion, to really make our reputation what it should be. I can't really answer to why it happened the way it did and you know what the case was, but that's why I want to make sure that each one of you has my direct contact for any issues or concerns.
I know after that period, we bought 10 plots because we had a chairperson. We never sold it. But they thought it would be a good idea to buy them. People could then take the part of the rest of the and I think we sold about 6 of them. I'm not sure. Whether we 4 left or what we have. In any event, I don't want to say how bad we have a family bonding. I was told in 1954, everybody's going to be upset when I'm telling them. My father bought over 20 plots, divided among some relatives, and they bought something like $60 a plot.
Oh, yeah. When I look at some of the documents from the 1920s and 30s, and I see 20 plots for, you know, $30. And it's, whoo, yeah.
1954.
It's quite interesting. Sorry, I've been on my tippy toes because I'm very short. I'm just gonna go back to flat foot now. I don't think this will reach, but
See, they were pre-planning back then.
yeah,
So why should we not do
absolutely.
it?
That's okay.
The permits.
All right, well, anyone that wants my direct contact and those of you who do have spaces with us, I would like to look into your file so I can make sure everything's up to date, even as little things like phone numbers. It's important for us to have everything accurate. So I will have my card and we can chat afterwards when you're getting refreshments. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Just a comment. I've been, passed down the cemetery, I have a message. The temple doesn't have any plots, so if anybody is thinking, oh, okay, I'll make the proposal to the rabbi, I'll buy a plot from the temple. We have 2 or 3, but they're individual plots. They're not.
That's what I wasn't sure of. So just to kind of say why I wasn't sure, our maps will tell us who's buried. When it's a temple that owns spaces, we don't necessarily always know who's going where. When you privately purchase from the cemetery, we have the owner's name notated, but so I wasn't sure how many you had on your end there.
As it turns out, over the last 3 years, the last 3 pairs
Right.
of plots that we had.
That makes sense. Because from what I saw, it looked like maybe 8 or so.
Unfortunately, over time, there were individuals that had to be buried, and there was not a companion.
Right.
They didn't try to put those singles together. They just put them where they were.
Right.
Now we've got these onesies, which isn't as high to me.
So I do have spaces right around your area, like, you know, next to it. So yeah, so if anyone that did want to buy through the temple that cannot, I can make sure that you're right with it.
I'll just end by quoting Joe Bell. You may not remember saying this to me. It was 18 years ago. And you told me, you were talking to me about the relationship between Gleason's and Temple Bethel. And you said with a very stern face, if you make us choose between you and Gleason's, we will choose Gleason's.
You did that to a rabbi before you.
Thank you very much.
Who doesn't know the story about the 3 envelopes?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Up there, yeah.
So.
I don't know.
All right. So, this woman's husband died. And while she was sitting Shiva, her best friend came and said, Sadie, you are so lucky. Your husband was such a wonderful person. And Sadie said, oh, you don't even know how wonderful he was. He left before he died 3 envelopes. Really? What was in the 3 envelopes? Well, the first one was marked plot. And wasn't that the most beautiful cemetery plot you ever saw? Oh, yes, it was really nice. Second one, oh, I left out. There was $10,000 in that envelope. Second envelope was marked funeral, and there was $10,000 in it. And wasn't that the most beautiful funeral you ever saw? Oh, yes, Sadie. Oh, my God, it was just gorgeous. And the third one was marked stone, and it had $10,000 in it. And isn't this the most beautiful stone you've ever seen? So now, I want to thank all of our 3 very, very, very informative speakers and tell you that Bill Gleason has very graciously offered to provide the refreshments today. So please go out and enjoy the refreshments. And thank you all.
Thank you. Folks, if anybody wants documents, just reviewing some of the state trust stuff, I have documents here. We also have the right to control type documents and just some vital sheet of information. Yeah. So,